Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's Metaworld News. This is the week ending the 10th of June of the grand old year 2018. Now, once again, it's been actually a very quiet week, so I think this is going to be about the shortest news ever. But we said that last week, and it lasted an hour because I insisted on rabbiting and opinionating. I'm going to resist the temptation to do that this week. My name, by the way, is Mal Burns, and you can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Malburns, or one word, MALBURNS. And you'll find various links to news items and things like that that I do actually post up there. There's a secondary feed, which is twitter.com/MetaWorldNews, named after this program, where you'll find more specific feeds about social virtual worlds and things like that. Just been checking them, checking my own feeds, see if I can find some news other than what I had on my list. And I can't. It's a desperate week. There have been a number of things going on, and other pardon me, things imminent, entertainment, business expos, consumer electronics, Apple's developers thingy, and all this sort of stuff where we sort of hear odds and ends coming out, but nothing really strategically that important on the virtual reality interfacing front, or even augmented reality. For that matter, bit of a case of the same old, although possibly bigger, better, more. Right. However, however, we have a couple of videos this week, which I've posted on various, mostly on my Tumblr blog, actually, that come from YouTube, of course, which are possibly well worth looking up. One is a regular series called Endgame. This is held in the VR chat software. And they hold one every Wednesday at 7 p.m. And it's a kind of broadcast that actually has slight commonalities to something like our own In-World Review used to do. It tends to be a general sort of topic program. And the one that they published last week, I think it came up on about Thursday, the recording of the Wednesday program, was about sleep, nutrition, and exercise with Dr. Brian Wind. So they're basically using virtual reality, avatar broadcasting like we do here, to have some interesting topics discussed. It's very different every week. They have a Discord channel where they publish the theme of the next week's program in advance, so presumably people can contribute and stuff like that, or just book their diaries to turn up because they're interested. Anyway, quite a good series that. So it's called End Game, and you'll be. I think actually the account at YouTube is actually called End Game, even though they do some other stuff as well. So flipping backwards, not forwards. Thank you, Windows. I'm just going to. I'm in my YouTube feed right now. Um, Yep, I have plenty of videos up there. They tend to be arts videos and stuff, mostly from Second Life, which we don't really cover too much here. Right, a day ago, um, I think this was on Friday. I'm pretty sure it was. I actually watched this on because it was live streamed, although I didn't go in world for it. Um, Philip Rosedale of High Fidelity was interviewing somebody called Peter Diamandis, who is rather well known. The subject matter had nothing really to do with virtual worlds. It had to do with ecology, the state of the planet, the state of politics, and new economic systems and stuff like that, and the end of the world as we know it. Hopefully not, kind of discussion. But it was very interesting indeed, and very good example of two avatars with we've heard of the phrase uncanny valley. Both Philip and Peter's avatars are very realistic looking. In fact, the only thing that keeps the uncanny valley out of it is the fact that for some reason all their superb avatars stand on what look like to be slightly folded legs. So they're always in this position where they're not quite standing up straight, even when they are. and it's a bit disconcerting. You think, who whacked the back of their knees, so they look a bit odd. But apart from that, they're very, very animated, and obviously Peter was very adept at controlling his. Presumably, he was in a headset. It's hard to tell, but they were busy sort of flapping their hands and doing things with each other. So shaking hands and turning to each other, and you did actually feel you were watching two people on stage, interacting as they would in the real world, rather than just as avatars. So quite interesting visually, as well as a very interesting conversation too. Okay, so that's out the way. Now I'm going to go to our main Twitter feed, which is where I check from my highlights. And as I said, it's not so much a matter of highlights. There actually only seem to be two entries in the main feed this week. I must say, as the days of the week fly by, it's not always possible for me to judge because I am actually posting links all over the place, but on all sorts of things to different channels, not necessarily the ones we might say here. Um, Anyhow, digitaltrends.com have a post. This is more on interfacing stuff. NVIDIA, these are the people. Would I like a. Oh, God. Yes. Come on. Cookies. Got to. Sorry, everywhere you go these days, you've got to answer a questionnaire to now give people permission to. It's effing annoying, as they say. Right. Digitaltrends.com here. NVIDIA, who make graphics card and stuff, they've got a patent for something called infinite resolution, which could change gaming forever. Um, this is actually very interesting, and it's something that surprised me that this actually hasn't before. In fact, I remember talking years ago to Philip Rosdell about things like image compression, basically fractal image compression, and different ways of compressing images, which he had long since been involved with, long before he created Second Life. Um, Nvidia, they've the patent is filed on 7th of June, so it's up to date. NVIDIA describes the technology that could fundamentally alter the way games look, feel, and perform. NVIDIA calls it infinite resolution, and it's effectively a clever way of using vector graphics to replace static textures in games. Let's dive into what that means and why it could be a big deal. I'm not going to read here. I'm going to explain it my way. Back in the day of I suppose when it was Apple Mac, we started having graphics programs on the Mac. Most things were based on something called vector processing. Hence, in the days of making magazines and page makeup programs, Adobe's PostScript language. Basically, this describes shapes on a page, however small or large you wanted them to be. They were always infinitely resizable. And the texture, in other words, the graphical detail that filled those shapes, was encoded separately. It wasn't encoded as kind of pixels. It was a descriptor that would generate the graphics as required at any size whenever it was reproduced. So, hence you had things like fonts, typefaces in printing, which are actually complex shapes, but they're really tiny, and they probably just had a solid color like black. And yet the same, you could copy and paste a word from that and make that word into a headline simply by stretching it. You didn't have to worry about redrawing all the detail of the font. You just stretched it because it was a group of shapes. And therefore, you could actually use data to describe what's in the shapes, and the pixel was be drawn on screen in kind of real time. Contrary to that, you had things like Photoshop, which weren't vector drawing programs or shape programs based on objects. They actually dealt with the real pixels. So you could have I don't know, a yellow balloon or something in a Photoshop picture, which could just as easily have been an object filled with yellow. But it wasn't. It was actually a whole bunch of semicircular sort of yellow pixels. And arguably that is a waste of space because it's the same information. So if that had been a vector, for example, the vector would have been the shape of the balloon, and the descriptor would have said just fill it with yellow or something. Um, um, there's always an economy with vectors, and what you used to find in page makeup is that as things progressed and you went from grayscale to color and all this, and you had complicated page makeup programs like Quark Express or something, you would often have a picture you wanted to put in place, and you would take a photo silhouette of somebody. For example, you could use Photoshop to create an outline of them and then copy that outline, or rather save that outline with a sort of pen path around it, which was kind of a vector shape. And then in your page layout program, as well as importing straight rectangular pictures and things like that, you could import the shape of this person's cutout and then put the cutout of the actual pixels of them into that shape rather than actually have a bigger shape with a lot of white pixels that were redundant because they were behind the scenes, so to speak. That's the way PostScript worked, and they don't mention it exactly in this article, but it's clearly this is what NVIDIA are getting at. Now, consider for the fact if you're in OpenSim or somewhere older like Second Life, most of the objects around you are actually objects. The screen behind me is simply a big rectangular screen with a texture on its surface. Now, the screen is an object. It is a single prim. As the language goes here, it doesn't take up any space as such. What actually takes the weight, so to speak, is the texture that's actually loading into it. So in virtual worlds and many games, there is already a mix of object-based and raster, in other words, pixel-based content in front of you anyway. Now, returning to the article, it says most games use textures that are created for a set of fairly standard resolutions: 720, 1080, 1440, 4K, etc., and various in betweens. These textures cover just about every surface in a modern PC game, from character models, weapons, to environments. Every 3D model is effectively wrapped with a 2D texture. And NVIDIA's patent is designed to change how these textures are actually rendered. Um, Developers currently package games with a series of these textures, and when I say package, I mean this equally applies to delivery via the web, of course. Um, One for each resolution the game runs at, and one detail setting at each resolution. This, however, requires a lot of storage space, and of course, online, I would add myself bandwidth. And it means today's games have a ceiling or a maximum resolution. Um, to see what I mean, try opening something like Diablo 2 on your modern computer. Your resolution in that game is going to max out at somewhere around 1024 by 768, which is way below what current monitors are capable of. Um, but they can't scale the game up to a higher resolution without it just being too big, and clumpy. Um, the game is going to stretch those undersized textures across your whole display, like when you use your zoom tool to zoom into a very a long way on a small picture. Now, NVIDIA would fix these issues by, instead of packaging games with a massive set of static textures, games will be built using NVIDIA's technology, which would include only a single set of texture information, not the actual textures themselves. I mentioned earlier, of course, this is why I took a diversion and explained PostScript to you. This is exactly the same thing. There'll be data describing the texture rather than the actual texture. And done adequately, I mean, that can work out really well. For example, if you're a graphic artist or have any familiarity with this, you'll know what a gradient is. You might have a screen where it starts with yellow on one side, ends up with blue on the other, and this gradient obviously will go through green or something in the middle as the color changes from one side of the screen to the next. Well, if that was a vector, like a single object, the screen would be your whole object. And instead of having thousands and thousands of pixels ranging in different shades from yellow to blue, It will simply have a descriptor telling your monitor that it starts at yellow on one side, finishes at blue on the other, and tells the monitor to work it out. It's not quite that simple, of course, but basically the descriptor will tell the display to work out what you meant to see. So when you load it, there won't be thousands of pixels starting in yellow, ranging to blue. There will simply be an instruction saying start at blue, start at yellow, end up at blue. It may not even mention green because green by default, is going to be what results in the middle. Obviously, this is very complicated code, and it's not nearly as simple as what I'm saying, but you'll understand that's how it kind of works in principle. Um, because your computer now will now draw textures in real time, your games could be future-proofed from the start. If that game, Diablo, whatever it was built this way, you'd be able to play on an 8K monitor, and it would look as sharp and detailed as it does on an old 800 by 600 cathode ray monitor, because everything is made up from the description and it renders on the monitor and via the graphics card at the resolution you need, not a fixed resolution where it started. So obviously, it's surprising it's taken such a long while. But Nvidia's idea here now is that I think their patent and their technology would need to be used to do this, but I think the idea is they can create more realism and better resolution and detail by having something that actually is infinitely scalable to whatever you're using to play Watch It on, and does away with the massive amount of data which has to describe it, hundreds of thousands of individual pixels, sometimes, which are actually the same thing. Why have, 8,000 pixels that are the same color for a pure blue sunny, summer's day sky when you can simply create an object and say that's the shade of color that's in it. Obviously, there are small detail areas like where the green field in the horizon overlaps the sky. There is much more subtlety to what you see. It's not just a pure color, but you can get the idea. Just think of everything you see that at the moment are pixels. Think of them as objects. They may be big area objects, or they may be small objects. They may be in 2D, they may be in 3D. But think of the objects and then the detail that's mapped on it in real time, rather than an object that has embedded amounts of detail that is just impractical in terms of file sizes. So as this article points out, the technology actually isn't anything new. I could have told you that. It's just a novel application of using existing technology, which is basically vector graphics. Um, and then the article does point out that these graphics are often used in graphic design, etc. Blah blah blah. NVIDIA's patent filing here simply applies the same principles to textures in games. And by games, I would extend that to online environments like OpenSim, Second Life, and I suspect in many ways this would even affect some of the more advanced virtual worlds now, which are all mesh. They still have to, mesh is objects, but the textures that are mapped onto them are usually mapped in pixels. They are not mapped in descriptors. So anyway, enough of my talking about that. I said it was a slow news day, so there's my excuse to rabbit on about a news item. Okay, the only other one I've got actually is voicesofvr.com. They have several podcasts a week as regularly, um, and I'm not sure how many. I think there weren't actually that many this week. The only one I've actually tagged here is 654 on June the 8th. Indigenous futurism and aboriginal territories in cyberspace. Curious, this one. This was a very curious one with somebody called Jason Edward Lewis. Basically, how can I explain it? It's to do with storytelling, I guess, indigenous populations. The conversation or the recording of the podcast was actually at a symposium conference in Canada. Um, I must admit, when I first saw this, I tended to think of Australia, because we call them the native population is called Aborigines, but of course this applies to North America, Canada, and anywhere where there are, original populations that aren't necessarily the dominant ones now. So, yeah, storytelling and, being always visualizing and explaining the past, present, and future, etc. So interesting little chat there in the more general sense. Now I have one more post here, which technically looks like it should have been announced last week, but I can't remember whether I did. Virtual world's best practices in education. Here's an education-based virtual worlds conference. It happens usually mostly in Second Life, and then sometimes a day or so on OpenSim. Last year it was all. Sorry, it wasn't last year. It was earlier this year. Oh, forgive me. It was actually all in Second Life this year. Basically, they have now Rockcliffe University have now published the conference proceedings in the Journal of Virtual Studies. Um, so let me have a looky see here. Actually, right, Journal of Virtual Studies. Let me. So I'm just trying to see if I can get an URL for you to click through to get to what basically will be PDFs. Um, they never darn it. Sorry. Um, Right, it's not giving me the direct URL, so you're going to actually have to get it from my feed by the look of it. Um, okay, also, I think you'll find if you go to Rockcliffe, again, I'm not sure what their web address is offhand. Um, yeah, go to my Twitter feed and you'll find the link in there to it. But if you know Rockcliffe University or VW BP sites and stuff like that, I think it's vwbpe.org, then you can probably find a quicker link by going there. But all the proceedings are published in, and you can read the articles or download them in PDF form.
Yeah, and that
So
URL is urockcliffe.com.
urockcliffe.com. Okay.
urockcliffe.com. Yep.
Okay, that's the one to go for, folks. Thank you, James.
Yep.
um, I'm just looking in our Metaworld feed, and there's absolutely nothing there for you either. There are a couple of new videos, but they're kind of replays of our own kind of stuff, really. So nothing particularly new there. And I'll have a quick look here in this will be the Google department. Based psychedelic, I'm sure. Yes, nothing much in the Google department either. Um, okay. The only thing virtual worldwide, and I can't tell you more on this at the moment. There is on Google Plus, which has a number of OpenSim hypergrid variant groups. There is a user called Sarge Misfit. That's Sarge space Misfit MISFIT. That's his avatar name. I can tell that because there's a picture which shows his name tag. I don't know how to contact him, except via Google Plus. In fact, I did actually put a note to him about being able to not find something, and he replied. But again, I have no idea how to grab him on Skype or anything like that. However, he has a sorry, I'm ad-libbing this as I'm going along. I'm having to. There we are. I found it. Sorry. Open the relevant page. Right. He is. It's called Excelsior Station. It's a project. He's also got a. It is basically an open simulator grid, um, hypergrid enabled, I guess. Apparently, it's meant to be a sort of. He hopes it's going to be a kind of hub for all sorts of things going on. So rather than just an average destination, I think his focus is on role play, but it sounds like he's doing more. But he's also announced, and this is actually where I had to write to him because I couldn't actually find it when I searched, but he's actually apparently streaming and recording via a service called Mixer, which says it's a game streaming service. I don't know whether that's the one. Do you know, James? Is that the one that Microsoft own?
Um,
Mi- Mixer.
Perhaps, yeah, that sounds right.
He spells it with a single X. I think there's something similar with a double X. But okay, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, I went to the site and he says look for Open Simulator, went and searched the streams, and I did exactly that. Typed in Open Simulator as all one word, but with two capitals, where the capitals belong, if you see what I mean. Just as he's put it, and no results. So he replied to me saying, um, not yet. I've got the only channel that will be broadcasting OpenSim stuff there. Um, the only channel? I don't. I don't understand how you get the only channel. Anyway, I went really to find out what was going on. So if you're in Google Plus, you might want to look up in OpenSim Virtual some of the groups a user called Sarge Misfit and sort of give him a bit of encouragement to find out exactly what he's doing with the Excelsior station and whatever. It seems like a novel. I imagine other hypergrid destinations may well be doing this, but having a Patreon account for grid or a destination is an interesting sort of way to go. In other words, you don't have paid subscribers, whatever. You just have patrons. Where maybe he just allows people who patronize him access. I don't know. I don't know. But I thought I'd mention it. Right, before I go on too much. Um, Also, we mentioned last week the Maria Koroloff, of course, who's still billed at the headline of this program, by the way. We are going to do something about that. I'm just waiting till we can know what to put it instead. Um, it's winding down hypergrid business, but Handheld, who is one of the people behind Avatar Fest, has posted at Google Plus to Maria saying, wanting to thank her very much for helping them get off the ground, etc. And without Maria's encouragement and support, blah blah blah, they wouldn't have made it. And second, they want to say, wonder if they can have some kind of farewell hypergrid business exhibit at this year's festival. This year's festival, by the way, is, as far as I recall, in September at some point. It's actually a 1 week adjacent. It may be the beginning of October. I think it's the immediate weekend after our own Hypergrid International Expo. They're very close together, so they can ride off each other's backs, so to speak. It's all good stuff to bundle this stuff together. Um, but yeah, anyway, the idea that we might, or he might do some kind of tribute to Maria's site there. And
Yeah, it'd be lovely.
yeah, Jamie Ann writes, as everybody's saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah.
Do it,
I
do
don't know
it.
why. I don't quite know what a tribute to a blog or a news site would look like. Do you just take selected highlight articles over the years and put them all on prims into a big circle like a Stonehenge that everybody have made of hypergrid business, or do you get Maria along to talk about it? I don't know. I don't know how that would,
Yeah,
what form that would take, but
I like
yeah,
the
it'd be nice.
Stonehenge idea. That sounds good.
That's true. Yeah, sort of prints with a hole in them.
You're right.
Yeah, just like there's lots of archways. In some in good shape, some in not such good shape. Maybe that is a metaphor for the state of the hypergrid, Stonehenge.
Mm.
Yeah, you got big solid arches, and you got a full fallen stones, all connected together in a circle called the hypergrid. Except the hypergrid's not a circle, and
Oh,
it's not on
gracious.
one level either. It's multi-level and multi-layer and blah, 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 blah. Can't describe the hypergrid. It's too complex. It's 3D in itself. Right. Okay. Well, I think that's it. It was certainly it for me. Any thoughts this week, James? Any comments on the miserable
Uh,
pieces of news I've had?
no, no comments, but um, well, I'll have to read the article about NVIDIA's procedural texturing because
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious to know if that would be photorealistic or would it just be for vector design textures. So, for example, the bricks behind us right
Yeah.
now, have I would say that well maybe they are a drawn texture. It's hard to tell as opposed to a photographic texture. But that would be the
Oh,
challenge with the procedural graphics.
Yeah, these bricks aren't photographic. They are actually drawn artworks, but they are
They could
a
be a vector,
repeating
yeah.
tile texture. Yeah, I mean they, for example, economize on space by being, it's actually quite a small texture there, but it
Mm-hmm.
repeats and it's tiled seamlessly, so you don't notice that those bricks are made of lots of them. But technically, that could be vector because the individual um, texture within each brick
Right.
could be
Could be small
each brick
shapes.
could actually be a vector, and those little where the cement or whatever it is could actually be consistent. But it really depends on the descriptor. Um, the I know in PostScript, for example, as I say, you can have a cutout of somebody on the page, and every single pixel from the photograph is actually rendered accurately. The main thing is that any pixels that are superfluous are ignored because they fall outside the shape that is the descriptor. And when it comes to more simple things like a graduated tint in a picture box background, that basically is a picture box that says yellow on one side, blue on the other, and it probably doesn't even mention green. It simply creates an instruction so that your screen paints from yellow through to blue over that pixel area. And what that produces is described mathematically. There's no actual photo to be created there. So green can simply be the midpoint of that blend, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a photograph of a billboard that actually contained a gradient from yellow through to blue and maybe has some information in it, it would be a different matter. But one of the easiest ways to judge what's going on here is to look at JPEGs. I think you know how sometimes a low resolution JPEG is a bit pixelated and stuff. Um, they that simply takes a photograph and uses a kind of vector kind of clumping to encode, to compress the image.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a wonderful photograph of a lovely summer's day. In the foreground, you've got some trees and a bit of foliage. You've then got a grassy green field going off to the horizon. In the field, there are daffodils and things, patches of yellow. And when it gets to the horizon, it hits a blue sky, which is almost all the same color of blue, taking up the top, third of your image, and maybe just over to the right hand side there's just a hint of color change where the sun is kind of off camera at that point, right? So the ideal image compression will um, record every single pixel detail where there is detail, but where there is no detail to be recorded, it will create an object and simply compress the object and describe the pixels that are in that object. So, for example, you could cut the size of that image I've described by about a third simply by creating an object out of the sky, which is a uniform color. The spots of yellow daffodils and leaves and things like that growing in the grass would not compress particularly because the detailed information you'd have to keep there. But everywhere there was sort of commonality, like a blanket color or whatever, or a variation in color that is really minor, then if it can be described in the compression, then it's really down to when it's opened to be rendered, whether the program you're using can decode those descriptions and give you photographic accuracy.
Yep.
But yeah, a JPEG image, with a third of the sky that's all the same color of blue, could be compressed by a third just on the basis of its sky, let alone other attributes it might have. So I think this, they're talking about the same thing for games and stuff. Um, you know, OpenSim here would send our prims, our objects, to your viewer, and your viewer would decode the pixels needed to fill those objects in real time. At the moment, you are actually streaming not only the shapes but also the textures, all of it in one foul swoop from the server, and your graphics card is just rendering it as it streams in. It's not having to decode anything, if you see what I mean.
Yep.
So
Then
I think I know I'm going to get a IM shortly. Tell me I've just been talking a little rot and nonsense, and
I don't know
I'm
about
all wrong.
that. But
Don't
what I
worry,
do, the other question I have is, are there dates for the Hypergrid International Expo? Did
yes,
okay.
it's actually a weekend when you're in Europe.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Do you remember?
I remember it now.
So
Now I know.
yes, because I disappointed you won't be able to film it. I believe it's the last weekend of September.
Okay.
It's not far enough away yet for it to be sort of on the slow burner, but that's the idea.
Yep. Tell me about the
You know,
conflict in the schedule, and I remember that popped it right into my head.
yeah. Nah, I think by putting it back to September, putting on a slow burner, hopefully it'll be a nice stew by the time it's like
Okay,
yeah,
very
a
good.
nice flavoursome stew, where with all the herbs firmly embedded by the time it comes round.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, everything we were going to do in the spring plus extras for the autumn. But you're right, I will have to wake up to that, about August time
It'll
to
happen faster than we
plan.
think, won't it?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. But let's have a couple of months of laziness beforehand.
indeed.
Yeah. So I don't know about elsewhere, but in Britain here, August. Well, not August, sorry, but the autumn. When everybody's back from their summer holidays and
Hmm.
stuff. That's what we call conference season. Don't know why, but all in the real world, this is but virtually too. I think all the conferences happen around that time of
That
year.
happens here also in the U.S. Yep.
Yeah. What it is about autumn, I don't know. Why they don't have them in winter where everybody's huddled down anyway, or even in spring before summer's hit. I can at least understand why they don't have them in the summer because it's hard to hold a conference on the beach. But
Mm-hmm. And to get people away from their recreation.
I, yes, exactly, and not everybody's on the same weekend, so
Right.
it's sort of you just let summer be summer, except in Australia where it's winter. They can hold their conferences at a different time of year. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I don't know. Anyway, that's that. Yeah. So I think that's it for us for this week. I probably. How long's this show been? About 30 minutes. Probably.
37.
Oh right. So this is the no news week. It lasts 37 minutes, but you can't shut me out when I get going on something. Never mind. Never mind. Um, I'm going to call it a wrap. It's goodbye from me and dot
And
dot dot.
goodbye from him.
Very good. We'll return same time, same place next week with a lot of news or no news. But we'll be back, whichever way it happens. Bye for now.